if you would tell me a story about that wasp that you used to tell me about.
The way the story began was we were talking about Darwin. And when he started the thing, he was a Christian. As he got further and further into his study of evolution, and he saw this travail at every level, that the animals were all eating each other, and it was just this conflict universe where the strong were eating the strong, the adaptable were trying to adapt. A particular wasp down in South America that apparently would capture its victim and would insert its eggs up the anus of the living animal, where they would incubate, and they would slowly eat this living animal and devour it. And so that did it for Darwin. He said, if there is a God, we really should avoid him. But let us pray there's not a God that could allow this kind of travail to continue at every level. The savage garden, everywhere he went, it was dog eat dog. That particular story was interesting about how he lost his religion rather than gained a religion. The warfare state has been a constant since at least the Roman Empire, and probably before that. I mean, the vendors who sold the tools of war, who sold the gladios, the little short swords, who sold the equipment, everybody who is a provisioner to war does quite well. I mean, there is a warfare economy, or economy based on war, and it is lucrative for a certain group of people. I think there's a profit in it. And what happens is that profit corrupts the political institutions. And the nice thing about war is that it uses up the munitions. You got to replace them. Smedley Butler, he says it's a racket, right? General Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine, two medals of honor. When he got out, he just lowered the boom on the whole military complex. But what bothers me about Smedley is he didn't do it when he was in office, when he was a general. He waited until everything was until his pension was secure and his career was secure, and then he spoke out. I mean, that's what you see today. People don't speak out when they're in there, very few do, and then they get out and they blast the thing, but they don't turn over their rice bowl.
We seem to have a kind of apathy about all the sanctions that starve millions of people around the world, and the wars that we never seem to leave and come home from. So how do you make sense of that? I mean, it's just weird to me.
I think, David, I mean, the wars have become abstract to Joe Smith on the street. Really, America, the concern is getting out, making your living, working 9 to 5, coming home, watching your favorite TV thing on Netflix. And you're so tired out, you just don't have time to be intellectually involved in a war that's 7,000 or 8,000 miles away. I mean, everything around your home is quiet, sanguine, wonderful. I mean, you're just not involved. In the old days, or the Vietnam War, I guess, the last time when we had a draft, and then you would see your kids being dragged off to war. They didn't want to go, or the kids next door, or bodies coming back in. You just don't see that anymore. I mean, the whole nature of the military-industrial complex has become very far away from the general person on the street, in my opinion. And so the public just doesn't see it. But yet here's this right in the middle of the burgeoning city of Tampa, Florida, is Special Operations Forces, Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, I think it's called.
I had a friend that worked in that when I was in college, and he said he would just go in and he would man some of those drones and clock out and go get Dunkin' Donuts and clock back in and man some more drones shooting terrorists.
I know, it's surreal. I mean, you know, you go in there, you blow up a whole village, right? You come out, you have a little Coca-Cola,
Chinese,
and you drive back home, and on the way it says, you drive safely, don't go over 40 miles an hour. Here you've just destroyed something.
Yeah, caution school children walking, right? After you just took out a village.
Absolutely. I mean, what could be more clinical? I mean, it's like, here's a good analogy. You know, you go to the grocery store and you go get a nice piece of steak like this. It's nicely packaged, it's wonderful, it's displayed, it's attractive, take it home. Don't even think about the agony, Darwin's agony right there before you. I mean, we're just eating all these little animals. Very interesting. I mean, the irony is just overwhelming. And I don't think people think about it. They should think about it, I mean, quite frankly, from a very pragmatic point of view, if someone did make a mistake and there was a war, I think CENTCOM would be in the top 3 targets. I mean, it would be if I was targeting.
So that kind of ties into the idea that our monetary system, in order to maintain itself, must be tied to our perpetual military interventions around the world, right? Because we export our inflation, right? We get people to buy our dollars, and then we're able to export the effects of our consumerist economy, right? We don't feel all that money that the central bank creates. We don't feel that in the terms of rising prices and inflation, because so many people buy our dollars because we are the world's policemen. So we're a military-backed currency, world reserve currency.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, we're on the same
because
program.
To me, it seems like the amount of money that we create out of thin air through our Federal Reserve system.
But they just print it. I mean,
Right.
The Central Reserve Bank is what enables all of this nonsense. I mean, the situation with the Chinese, we send our little pieces of paper over there for their products, IOUs. They hoard these IOUs. At some point, they have been trying to buy companies back here in America and turn those IOUs into hard assets. We continually throw roadblocks in the way of their repatriating, or they're turning those IOUs into hard assets. At some point, they're going to lose confidence in those IOUs, or I would. In other words, you gave me an IOU, I'd like to trade it for whatever, a trucking company in New Jersey. Well, no, that's a strategic trucking company. You can't do that. It's a national security. You can't do it. There is an Israeli historian, philosopher. He's just written a book called Sapiens and a couple of other things. Very interesting guy. His name's Harari. That's his last name. And he talks about the myths that we live with. I mean, and how he says, this myth of country. There's no country. Just we agree that, it's a myth. He says people fight over all these myths about country and religion and what other the myths. But the one myth they don't fight over is money. They all agree on the money myth.
All these goodies that have all these emotional ties to people. I need health care, I want it free, or I need college, I need it free. I need Green New Deal, I want my solar panels free or subsidized. All those things are going to require skin in the game in order for us to afford these free things, and that's going to require people around the world receiving the poverty of sanctions, starvation, of people being in a chaotic regime change scenario, in order for us to clamp down on anyone who says, I don't want to trade my energy on dollars, I want to go to another currency.
Yeah, but see, it goes back. They are the abattoir. That's where all the slaughtering is being done, and we're getting our stuff here packaged.
Right.
We don't see all that.
Right.
Or most of us don't.
So many people in the, at least on-camera consensus, is that, of course you need government. If you didn't have government, you'd have the wild, wild west of violent gangs. And yet, they know that gangs, that governments operate as a violent gang mechanism. That they see human beings as their cattle, as their turf, and there are certain resources within that territory, and that we're one of those commodities. Our labor, our service, our creativity, they get to skim off some of the top.
Absolutely.
And in exchange, they tell us, well, you need us because we'll keep you safe from the robber, the terrorist, right? But they're really bad at doing that.
They're terrible.
Really, so they sell us their myth. Their biggest selling point is, look, we're awful, but we do keep away a killer. We keep away Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. They won't kill people if we're around. And we'll keep the guy that steals the thing out of your garage. We'll make sure he gets caught. So you can put up with our intrusion into your liberty, your property, your freedom, your labor, because at the end of the day, I mean, we got to keep you from the boogeyman. So it's okay to let us be a boogeyman. I think that's a religion, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, that's human. Again, human nature is nothing new here. This has been going on since we've been, I suppose, as a race, or as a species. I don't know what else could be said after such an eloquent disquisition on that.
So when the first time I met you, you were my first class in university, and the class was influencing public opinion, and it was an interesting class. And you were the first guest lecturer at that class, and you were presenting this idea called mice.
Well, there were two things. It said all you need to know about shaping public opinion and controlling people is mice, and you need to know why people are here. They're only why they do anything, and there are only two reasons they do anything, and one is seeking pleasure, and the other is avoiding pain. Anything you do, anything a human being does in his day, us sitting here, are we seeking pleasure? Are we avoiding pain by sitting here? If you interpret all behavior in that concept of it, everything that a human being does during the day is influenced by a motivation to seek pleasure or avoid pain. It's a very enlightening thing to think about. It's very simple. The second thing about mice is the way to influence is money, ideology, compromise, and ego. The easiest way to control someone is money. If that doesn't work, then you move to ideology. You say, in the way that works, you say, you know, you and I really believe the same sorts of things. We really ought to be on the same team. We're both conservatives. You know, we're criticized by other people, but ideologically we're alike. So you try to get them with ideology. Compromise, of course, we're just seeing a good example of this with Mr. Epstein. Compromise is catching people of power or anybody in a compromising situation. You can do it with drugs. You can do it with sex. Sex is probably because sex runs our universe. And then ego. And the ego is, you know, you're the smartest man that I've ever met. You're absolutely, in my life, I have met some people, but you absolutely have an insight that transcends anything, that sort of thing. But money, ideology, compromise, and ego. And with those mice, you can control almost any social situation. And with the overriding context being that what are these people doing here? Are they seeking pleasure or are they avoiding pain? The 8 o'clock board meeting in a corporation, guys sitting around there, are they seeking pleasure or avoiding pain? Well, some are maybe seeking pleasure, some are avoiding pain. But anyway, those are concepts that you can use to move yourself into a position of control in a situation.
One of the things that's always been interesting about you is that you've seen a lot of dark stuff. You've seen the underbelly of what moves, a lot of relationships in the world and governments, politics. But your demeanor is relatively chipper. You're the most cheerful nihilist I've ever met.
Perhaps being forewarned is forearmed. I know what's coming, and I see it, and it just doesn't particularly bother me.
So you live in a parasitical universe, though.
Well, I'm just doing the best I can, David. I'm just doing the best I can. I'm always interested in the environment that I live in. I'm a future liver. I'm always looking forward to the future. I've never been a person to look back on the past and miss or lament the past. But it seems more like a movie that was a nice movie that we saw. And I'm very much attuned every morning to getting up and looking at the future. Look at us. We grew up from the get-go watching these movies where there are good guys and bad guys, and the way that you resolve a problem is to go shoot a bad guy. I mean, the police today. In the old days, they didn't say bad guys, please. But in the last 5 or 10 years, they talk about who is the bad guy, the bad guys. Now we're absolutely back to Tom Mix and the old cowboy people looking for the bad guys. And they're good guys and bad. Very simplistic.
Yeah.
Well, life isn't that way. I mean, somebody's not totally bad and somebody's not totally good. But we have absolutely simplified it down to a point where we rationalize this kind of very vicious behavior. Show me the bad guy. Who's the perp? Who's the bad guy? I mean, we've just dehumanized humans. This is, we're desensitized. I mean, never in my life would there come a time when people were actually discussing whether torture was okay or not. I mean, it's one of those issues that if it's like touching a red hot skillet, if your finger doesn't come immediately back from it, if you don't recoil from that idea, I don't know what to say to you, because I was very disappointed by the public's reaction to the revelations of torture and abuse and that sort of thing.
I think they have moved a little bit.
And we still got Guantanamo.
That's still open.
Please, please. I mean, they're expanding and enhancing it.
What hope is there, right? When you see that, it's no wonder people are giving up the faith.
Well,
look, I'm a person who does have faith, but I understand that it's a miracle that people still hold on to it in some ways, that take it seriously, because I think there's almost an act of worship in rejecting the caricature of God that's presented in the public square by so many people who pretend to represent Him.
Well, there's, every day you get up and there's so many little hypocrisies in life. I mean, you just sort of, it's enough to make you crazy if you weren't crazy to start with. I mean, there's so many contradictions and so many, and that is one of the things. I mean, the Christian, supposedly a Christian nation can be the most violent on the planet.
Yeah.
The most violent.
Why is that?
I don't know, David.
Is it messianic? Is it that I think it's because we use the word Jesus as a stand-in to worship America itself. America as the shining city on a hill. It's our messianic savior, you know. And that's not unique to us. I mean, the Romans, when they went off to another land, right?
Yeah.
They said we're gonna show them the Roman way. Goodness, it's parasite after parasite. There's no good guys in the history.
Darwin was right.
But yet, how do you look? The thing that's a mystery about you is that you really believe that, but yet you have such a you love life. You have a good time with it. So I mean, how do you hold those two in tension?
We're born into this situation. It's just a scramble. I mean, you're dropped in as a baby and you just scramble. My life has just been a scramble. It's just been a tumble. I've tumbled from here to there, to here to there. I mean, how my life has gotten to this point, I have no idea. And I don't think it was intentional. I just think it's what occurred. And, I have a theory that the reason that babies cry, when they're born, is because they realize this crap storm they've been born into. Because they were something else before that. Before they were babies, the life source was somewhere. I think that's not arguable. It was somewhere, and then it came and there was this synapse, and then you have a baby. So the babies, for just one moment, it's like waking up from a dream. You remember you had that dream, and everything was perfect. It was wonderful, and then all of a sudden, whap! You wake up, and you're in this thing, so you cry. Yeah. And it also, they still remember their immortality in that form, and they know that they're going to die in this. The moment they're born, they start dying. So that's why babies cry. That's my secret. It's almost as if we were given this body to be tortured. Because only in this corporeal sense can you feel all this pain, can you feel all this frustration, can you be coerced back and forth. The Matrix. We're in the Matrix. But we had to be in this form, and again, this gets back to, hopefully, the creation of the Darwin thing. Anything that would design this is kind of interesting. I mean, you want to stay out of its way, right? But I also think that the future is going to be better. I do think better. And when I say better, it's a selfish thing for me. I think it's going to be good for me. I'm not sure about humanity. They got to do the best they can. Well, about 12 years ago, I met Prince Ermias, His Highness, who is the President of Crown Council of Ethiopia. he was interested in me doing for him what I'd done for other people. So I have basically, since I've been retired, and since he tends to be one of my primary, if not my only customer, His Highness Prince Ermias is president of the Crown Council of Ethiopia. And what the Crown Council of Ethiopia is it is a group that the Ethiopians has left over time, left Ethiopia primarily since the overthrow of his grandfather, Haile Selassie, in I think it was 75. The last Christian emperor, by the way.
Can you tell us a little bit of his story there, because he's a legendary figure for...
Haile Selassie was name originally was Tafari Markonnen. That was his family name. Then he achieved he was apparently a prodigy and very good at managing people, and he was assigned the title of Ras, which is like general or knight or someone who is a governor or whatever. And so he became Ras Tafari. And of course, there's a Rastafarian faith now, Rastafari, and it's named after Haile Selassie. The story is that his family line goes back to Solomon and Sheba. And the story is she goes over and meets him. And he is very persuasive and persuades her to adopt basically Judaism, and came back to somewhere in Ethiopia, the story goes. And apparently she and King Solomon were very close because she was pregnant when she came back from meeting with Solomon, and she had the beginning of the lineal dynasty of Ethiopia.
From what I understand, Emperor Haile Selassie was the hero for a lot of anti-colonialism in Africa.
Yes, he was the spark plug for forcing out the colonial powers in Kenya. He trained Nelson Mandela. Also, Haile Selassie was a spark plug behind the African Union, and the African Union headquarters is in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. But he introduced universities in Ethiopia for the people, free universities, and they became hotbeds of communist takeover, and that was the impetus for the revolution that finally ran him out of power and killed him. The Mengistu, the Red Terror.
Which is kind of like the French Revolution. There is kind of a similar pattern in the Russian Revolution, where the king becomes a sacrificial scapegoat kind of deal.
But Haile Selassie's was based on benevolence. And it's not quite the same thing as the French Revolution. People were pretty much kept in not impoverished, but
there's the same revolutionary spirit, is what I'm saying.
Same revolutionary spirit, right, from students.
To kill the king.
Students are where these things come from, ideas, the fomenting of ideas, a hotbed of ideas.
Yeah. What I've understood, a lot of the revolutionary movements, both the nationalist and socialist varieties that swept Europe and I guess around the world eventually, were funded by wealthy elites. It was not some kind of spontaneous barroom revolution from the bottom up, but they had a lot of these revolutionary movements were very much products of wealthy elites looking to shake things up a bit for their own benefit, right?
Well, perhaps to get a better grip. To get a little bit more. The Ethiopian experience was particularly puzzling because, quite frankly, Haile Selassie had been an absolute giant or go-between between Western powers and Africa, and Haile Selassie traveled the world. He was given ticker tape parades by Johnson and Kennedy. That was primarily because of the strategic nature and location of Ethiopia, and more particularly Eritrea, which is a part of Ethiopia at that time. And in Eritrea, apparently there was, in that area, geographical area, there was some stratospheric or some sort of environmental anomaly that allowed a listening post, electronic listening post, to be able to listen directly to Moscow, to bounce the signals directly and catch transmissions from Moscow. And so consequently, the United States negotiated a big lease on a base in Eritrea and was paying a very large sum to Haile Selassie every year for that. The Russians, of course, are the communists, and it's not clear who really fomented the communist revolution, if the students themselves became infatuated with the idea of communism, or if it was in fact pushed or inspired. But then, then we have the situation where Castro comes down and helps with the situation there. And the interesting thing was America, who was opposing Russia on every front when they reach out, did nothing to help Emperor Haile Selassie.
They just looked the other way, kind of deal.
Looked the other way. Looked the other way. Sausage and foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy. The two things you never want to see how they're made. Yeah.
So what do you think the future of Ethiopia is going to be like? I mean, what's on the horizon?
Well, it's interesting. The Chinese are one of the Chinese are a major power in Africa now. I mean, and this is a difference in foreign policy. The Chinese come in, they have something that they're interested in a country. They don't get involved in the politics. They don't try to dictate anything. They just come in and make a deal. Now, America comes in, on the other hand, the first thing you want to hear about is, we want to give some military aid. So, I mean, but the Chinese have come in. They have a very modern, in Addis Ababa, they have a very modern urban mass rail system, transporting people around. They have just now, not just now, but in the last 24 months, 36 months, they have finished a railroad from Addis Ababa to Djibouti. So, they're spending a lot of money. They're involved in the commerce, and ironically, the Chinese are using Ethiopian labor because it apparently is cheaper now, as I understand, than the Chinese labor. So they're all coming from cheap labor. The Indians are in India. I understand some Turks are in. The Saudis are in buying land because they want to have, everyone is in buying agricultural land because it's a pretty fertile and arable deal. So what do I think is going to happen? I don't know. The big thing right now is the Renaissance Dam. And the Renaissance Dam, about 85 to 90% of the water of the Nile River comes from Lake Tanya in Ethiopia. That's the source. Ethiopia is damming the outflow from Lake Tanya to harvest hydroelectric power, which they are pre-sold to Kenya and I think to Tanzania and that sort of thing. But of course, the people downriver, there are about 250 million people downriver, in Sudan and Egypt, that are very concerned about that flow of water and what's going to happen to it when the dam closes its gates. I don't think they should be concerned. What I think is going to occur is that the water flow is going to be normalized rather than this flood-drought system. They're going to keep it up in the reservoir of Lake Tanya and release it at a constant rate. The new President Abiy, who is we're very encouraged with, who seems to be a very progressive, can-do sort of guy, likable even, is been to Egypt and told him, I swear that we will not do one thing to hurt you, but the Egyptians are still doubtful. Some people whisper in their ears to upset them. I mean, who knows what political machinations are going on behind the scenes. Well, America is playing intervention catch-up. I mean, the Chinese were in doing business. They weren't intervening, they were doing business, making deals for rare earths, for resources, for oil, farmland. labor. I mean, they're making deals. And, you know, Donald Trump says, I want to make deals. I want to make a deal, got to make deals. I mean, to my way of thinking, going in and giving military arms to those people, or to any people, is not a good thing. There was a big faction in the United States. It was not at all for the white government in South Africa to capitulate to black rule. And again, Haile Selassie was a big factor in that occurring. So one could argue, coming back to why we didn't intervene in Ethiopia when he was overthrown by the communists, might have been, you know, some institutional payback from DC. We demonized the Mau Mau in Kenya. I mean, we all saw those pictures of the Mau Mau throwing out the British and in the train coming back down the track full of nuns, and they were all going to be taken over by the Mau Mau and that sort of thing. But we grew up with that. That was our story, our episode. But you know, what Trotsky said: if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break eggs.
Do you see any hope for our appetite for war overall, or do you think we'll just continue in a perpetual grinding out towards, you know, because in my opinion, I think we are losing appetite for war. I do. I don't know if it's going to translate into a change, but at some point, it can only handle so much, you know.
I forget who did. I wish I could remember, but that was at a meeting of a Future Freedom Foundation in Washington. And we had this lovely speaker. I know him, I just can't recall his name right now, but he's from Louisiana. And the question was, you know, when will the Americans come to the realization and this enlightenment about war? And he says, don't count on it. He says, the only thing that'll end this war is when they can't afford it anymore. Now that's pretty dark, but he convinced me. I kind of listened to him. I just, it'll take. And quite frankly, you know, you think about the history of empire. Isn't that the history of empire? They just keep on fighting until they go broke. Yeah. My wife we were talking about the fall of empire. When we were, I think we were someplace in Europe, and she says, Owen, don't worry about the American empire falling. She says, we'll be a great tourist attraction. Look at this town. It is a great tourist attraction. And this was once the greatest empire. I think we were in Spain. Barcelona, that's where we were, Barcelona. She says, we will just be another tourist attraction. So then you won't even notice that we're not the most powerful anymore. And I said, well, I've never been concerned about being the most powerful, but I think you've got something, because you think about it. All the great we go to Italy to go to see the ruins of empire, or we go to London to see the ruins of empire. Yeah. Or we go to Italy, you know, we go to Venice, we go everywhere you go. I mean, there's an empire. I wish I could be more upbeat about, do I think that we're becoming more spiritual? No, I don't. I think we're becoming trans-spiritual. I mean, we're doing something else in that regard. I wish it were different. The millennials are less religious. They're less interested in children. Maybe they want a religion, but it has to be carefully crafted by Lucasfilms and with footnotes. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you think you've had to take the opposite opinion, that we are becoming more...
It's in fits and starts, less violent, but violent, it's not, I see history as not a trajectory like this. I see it as going up and then little swirls, downward cycles of hell and awful things, but it's kind of slowly going up. And it's not a perfect cyclical pattern. It's big downward swings and then up and then big downward, and it's slowly moving upwards, I think. That's my general opinion. And it doesn't mean that, you know, it's not on autopilot. We have a radical free will choice to decide whether we're just going to be locked in a bystander effect while people continue to chew people up in a meat grinder of stupidity, or whether we're going to take our time in this earth and make the meaning count, make our time count, make our role model at least somewhat try to be consistent. And that's what I'm trying to to suggest is the only way to kind of feel like you've done something that gives you a little bit of peace. Because once you understand, once you see the sausage, or whatever you want to call it, of the carnality, the violence of so much of governance, you have an obligation at that point. I think a lot of people are ignorant about that, and I don't think they see it, and so for them, I'm kind of like very gracious to them, like, you don't get it, so I'm not going to give you a hard time. But once you see it, you have a choice to make. You're either going to find a way to numb it out and go back into just yourself, or try to do a little bit to make that machine grind a little less efficiently.
I do believe this, that a lot of us, what you're doing, you're throwing pebbles in the lake, and you're making ripples, and I don't know what, but they will do something. I mean, it's going to do something. I mean, it's the butterfly flapping its wings affects the hurricane coming in, or that sort of thing. And so I do believe, and there's another old saying, it says, academics' ink lasts much longer than martyrs' blood.
Yeah.
In other words, stuff written down and it's out there and going. I mean, rather than martyring yourself in front of a truck or a policeman or whatever, you get your thoughts out there, keep hammering, just keep pushing. And if that makes you happy, see, I'm seeking pleasure trying to do that.
Right.
And I'm not avoiding pain, I'm just seeking pleasure. It's pleasurable to me to try to say don't kill each other. I mean,
well, look, it's all about, to me, again, to use that metaphor of looking and seeing how the violence is done and seeing it for what it is. It has an effect. You have to show the victim of these acts of evil, and when you show the victim enough, just show those people's stories and let them speak as if they're alive. Speak, if they're not with us, then the story will speak for itself, and then when we share it to others.
Well, but it again, it is, the reality is that every day, I mean, we've institutionalized this violence. I mean, every moment we're sitting here, our boys are over there killing somebody. Somehow we're killing somebody. I mean, it's just a machine. It's an institutional policy. We're out just killing people. I mean, our government is by the hour.
Right.
I mean, it's overwhelming. It's almost too much to think about. Oh, the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it go. It'll defend itself. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.